Alright, welcome back to Top Story on RFX, where I take a look at some major news headlines and give my first impressions. I'd like everyone to pay very close attention to this match you're watching of Titanfall 2, and let it serve as a vehicle of inspiration to anyone who's out there who's in a dark place and you think all hope is lost. Just know that you can still turn it around. Sometimes things start out really badly, and you get a round after round of really bad luck. But then, often quite unexpectedly, the tides turn. And that's exactly what happens here in this game. I'm getting absolutely crushed. I am the pheasant that keeps landing on everyone else's shotgun, and there seems to be nothing that I can do about it. But then suddenly, it is clear that Parzival 5322 is the most dominant force in the arena, and cannot be stopped by anyone for any reason. So with that being said, let's take a look at our top headlines now. Here we have one from Politico, and it says, Cuomo to close indoor dining in New York City. My first thought was, well, how does Andrew Cuomo, who's the governor of New York, how does he close the dining in New York City specifically? Now, maybe this is a statewide mandate that there can't be any indoor dining anywhere in all of New York, and that includes New York City. And if that's the case, that's kind of a weird headline. Well, why don't you just say he closes indoor dining in New York? That's it. You would just say in New York, period. And that would include New York City. But for some reason it says New York City. Now, maybe he has some special governor power that I'm not aware of where he can target specific cities and say, you can't have restaurants anymore. Maybe that's enumerated in the powers of the governor of New York. Maybe it is. I don't know. It probably isn't, but maybe it is. But I would like to use this story as sort of a jump-off point to talk about something else that I think is a little bit interesting. I think one of the big conflicts in our current political climate right now is this war between two philosophies of governance. One is the centralized philosophy of government, where you have a very strong level of top-down control, and then the other is a decentralized form of government, where power is more diffused and you rely on the individual decisions of the people who are being governed, and the person at the very top who's responsible for these people takes a more hands-off approach and trusts that people will make the prudent decisions on their own, whether that's based on good sense or just mutual self-interest, and the end result will be a positive outcome for the society as a whole. Now, there are pluses and minuses to both of these forms of governmental philosophy, right? In top-down control, in a centralized form of government, like, let's say, for example, what China has, it's very efficient. Right? It's very, very efficient, and you can more accurately control every single little aspect of things that go on, right? Whereas in the decentralized one, you just sort of have to have faith all the millions of individual actors out there in a society will make proper decisions in their daily lives, and the cumulative effect of that will be a positive outcome for the society as a whole. Now, I personally would argue for the decentralized method of governance. And the reason why is that I think even though it seems more risky and it seems more chaotic at the outset, what you actually have, though, is that you have significantly more brain power being applied to the problem that any society faces when you have a decentralized method of control. So if you have a centralized method, let's say you have a dictator at the very top of it, you only have one brain working on the problem. Now, he does have a lot of control, so he can actually make happen every single little thing that he wants to have happen, and so that there is an appeal to that, and there's a sort of efficiency to that. But it's really only one brain working on the problem, and that one brain has to anticipate all the countless different scenarios and complexities that can arise in a large, complex society. Whereas if you have a decentralized theory of government, you have all these millions of brains working on the problem simultaneously. So you actually have more brain power working towards solving the problem than you do in the centralized one. Now, it's less efficient, and it takes essentially an act of faith to let people make their own decisions. In my opinion, I think that the person who is willing to preside over a decentralized form of government is a significantly more confident, courageous, and overall better leader than the type of person who desires to preside over a centralized form of government. Because when you think about it, to be that decentralized leader, you have to have an enormous amount of confidence and trust and faith in the people that you're governing, to let them make their own decisions, and with the confidence that in the end things will work out for the best in that way. Whereas if you have less confidence, you're going to be more inclined to want that centralized form of government where you get to have absolute control of every little thing that happens. And of course, if things go wrong, well, then you can just blame the people that you're governing, saying, well, the only reason that things went wrong is because you didn't do exactly what I was telling you to do. But I would argue that someone like Andrew Cuomo and a lot of political leaders today, and that seems to be the overall direction of our political system right now, at least within certain circles, is leaders who want that type of centralized control, who look at a country like China, for example, with a very top-down hierarchical structure, with a degree of envy, saying like, my goodness, how efficient would it be? How easy would it be if we could just do the same thing here, where we could just declare a mandate, everybody would follow it to the letter, and things would work out so much better. I think that that's a very dangerous way to look at it. So I think those are two very sort of fundamental philosophical differences that we see warring with each other in America right now, between those who want that centralized versus those who want what I'm pretty sure is the original American ideal of a very decentralized form of governance. And I think that's one of the main conflicts that we're witnessing right now in the country. All right, so now with that being said, let's move on to a few more headlines. In the entertainment section here, we have one from Entertainment Weekly. It says, The Bachelor First Look. See the most diverse cast ever. Here's what I think is actually happening with The Bachelor deciding to have the most diverse cast ever. What might be happening is that The Bachelor's ratings are in decline, or at the very least, The Bachelor is failing to make the same sort of splash on the pop culture scene that it maybe once did. And so this is a desperate effort, like a Hail Mary, and you just sort of throw the ball as hard as you can, as far as you can, and just pray that somewhere out there, there's a wide receiver that's going to somehow manage to capture that football and get into the end zone. You don't know, you can't see him, you just throw the freaking ball as far as you can and pray for the best. That sounds what this is. They're like, all right, let's see if we can maybe generate a couple of headlines by having people with a wide variety of skin tones on this latest season of The Bachelor, and pray like hell that this saves our ratings so that we can keep our jobs and continue to make lots of money. I don't think that it has really that much to do with social activism, even though that's, of course, what everyone involved with the show is going to be telling themselves. They're going to be saying, everybody who's involved with this show is going to bed every night patting themselves on the back for their decision to make the most diverse cast ever. I just sort of imagine the producers of this show just thinking, my God, you know what? I really am a good person. I'm a great person. Look what I've done. I've made the most diverse cast in the history of The Bachelor, which is a history that's very important. And Jesus, I'm terrific. I really am. I'm a great freaking guy. I mean, I had my doubts initially, but now it's quite clear that I'm a freaking hero. Okay, so let's take a look at some headlines here from the Huffington Post, which, as I always mention, is one of my favorites. They never disappoint with incredibly sensationalist or absurd headlines. And so let's take a look at what they have here. The first one says their main top story is Looming Eviction Crisis Even More Catastrophic for Women. And this piece is by Alana Vagianos. My question to Alana would be, would you go up to a guy who's just about to be evicted and he's responsible for, let's say, 3 or 4 kids and they don't know where they're going to go and they're absolutely terrified? Would you walk up to them and say, yeah, but you know what? This is even worse for women. Would you do that? Would you walk up to that guy and show him this headline and say, yeah, so you're lucky because you're a guy, as you get evicted for, whatever reason, because your bar or your restaurant was shut down for the crisis through no fault of your own, and now you don't have any money, but your landlord is still demanding rent and you can't pay it, and now you're going to be evicted, and your family, which depends on you, can no longer eat or have a roof over their head, and you're totally freaking out, and you're thinking about blowing your freaking head off because you just can't take it anymore, and then you look at this headline that says, well, it's actually more devastating for women. I gotta say, does Alana have the guts to show this piece to a guy who's in that situation, who's freaking out, who's terrified, and has a family who he's responsible for? Just a question. Maybe she would. Maybe she would proudly thrust this headline in his face and say, fuck you, because that's who she is. I don't know what she was thinking. I don't know what her editors were thinking when they approved this piece, or probably encouraged her to write it. But nevertheless, here we are. Thank you, Huffington Post, for letting us know. All right, we have a story here on MSNBC, and I'm going to do something a little unusual with this because I actually talked about this piece several days ago. I mean, it was at least 3, 4, maybe even 5 days ago. But I would like to highlight that it is still on their website, on the front page, front and center on their website. And it is this story here that says, COVID is infecting millions of Americans, and Mitch McConnell has blood on his hands. I talked about this, I'm pretty sure it was in episode 4 of this show, and yet now we are on episode 7, and a number of days have passed between these two, and it is still on their website. Now, originally this headline, written by Mehdi Hassan, was worded very differently. It was worded saying COVID is killing millions of Americans, which of course is not true. The death toll is, I think, somewhere in the 200,000 to 300,000 range over the past 9 months. And so obviously it's not killing millions of America, but luckily after the piece was posted on the website, an editor eventually caught it and said, you might want to change that to infecting. It's not killing millions of Americans. I'm just saying that it's a little odd that this story, and I look at MSNBC every single day, and nearly all the stories, they refresh within 24 hours. There's new stories in the main, headline box here of MSNBC practically every day. Maybe one of them might linger for a little bit longer, but usually they're gone within 24 hours. Yet this one continues to be front and center. They are really trying to drive home the fact that Mitch McConnell has blood on his hands. And as I mentioned in episode 4, of course, every politician in Washington has blood on their hands, including our good friend Joe Biden, right? Because anybody who voted for the Iraq War or participated in formulating the policies of the wars in Syria and Libya, etc., as Joe Biden probably did, has a significant level of blood on their hands. The blood of children, in fact. But let's not pay attention to that. Let's just talk about Mitch McConnell and him being an asshole. So, I think that does it for today's episode of Top Story. I hope everyone has a nice day, and we'll catch you next time. Bye-bye.